You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the Sound Money Show from Casey Research with me, your host Andy Duncan, coming to you today from London in the UK. Today my guest is Nick Giambruno, Senior Editor at Casey Research, and he's currently in a slightly rainy New York. Today we'll be talking about internationalization, the investment opportunities in Cyprus, and how to internationalize your healthcare. Hello, Nick.
Oh, hey, Andy. How are you?
Very good. It's been a nice sunny day here today, so I'm sorry to hear about the rain in New York. Now, Doug Casey, he's a very big proponent of people internationalizing themselves. What's the basic process for how people should do that, and why should they do that?
All right. Well, here's how you should think of internationalization. It's a sort of insurance, and you have health insurance, fire insurance, and so forth. Internationalization is insurance against an out-of-control government. It's insurance against political risk that comes from your home government. So many people know of the general investment benefits of not having all of your assets in one asset class, for instance. You want to have a mix of stocks, bonds, real estate, precious metals, cash, and so forth. But this diversification concept also applies to political risk, and it's this risk that few people think about diversifying. And it's a risk that's unfortunately growing these days, especially in Western countries with deteriorating fiscal situations. It's these countries that have debt loads and future spending commitments that all but guarantee that they will eventually try to grab as much purchasing power or wealth as they can get away with. So this problem is particularly acute in the United States due to the obscene spending on welfare and warfare with money it doesn't have. So to look at what kind of actions these governments who get into these precarious situations might take, we just have to take a little look at history. Things such as capital controls, wealth confiscations, currency devaluations, one-off emergency taxes, bail-ins, nationalization of retirement accounts, and various other measures are things that happen when a government gets desperate enough. So the rhetoric and the methods may vary from country to country, but the end result is always the same, and that is the government siphoning off purchasing power from the people. And it is for this reason exactly that Doug Casey has said over and over that spreading your political risk beyond a single jurisdiction is the single most important thing he can recommend. And it's something I wholeheartedly agree with. But it's important to emphasize that most of the time, in order for these destructive measures to be effective, they have to be sudden and come as kind of like a surprise attack, such as what we saw in Cyprus last year. Where on a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning, Cypriots awoke to find that their banks had been indefinitely closed. They couldn't access their accounts online. Capital controls had been put into place, and their savings were no longer safe. And it came to a surprise to most people. And in order to be effective, these measures have to come as a surprise. So the critical lesson here is to act before it's too late. When you start to see the writing on the wall, it's time to start putting some of these internationalization strategies into practice. So to me, the financial direction of the U.S. government and most Western governments is pretty crystal clear. But the window of opportunity to internationalize and insure yourself from these measures is still open. This window is still open, but it does appear to get smaller with each passing week. So now is definitely the time to start implementing and developing these strategies. And one thing to also emphasize is it's incorrect to assume that this, couldn't happen in your home country. If history shows us anything, these kinds of measures can happen in any country. So that's why taking practical measures to protect yourself and your family is prudent now. And also, it's a concept that's not just for Americans or Europeans. International diversification and diversifying your political risk is something that's universal and that everybody in the world should strive to achieve. So in short, internationalization is prudent because it frees you from absolute dependency on any one country. And when you achieve that freedom, it becomes very difficult for any particular government to control you. And one last point I'd like to emphasize here is that there's a misperception that internationalization is illegal or somehow not allowed. But that's not true. There are many things that you can do to protect yourself that are legal and often can be done without having to even leave your own home. So these are the reasons why people should look into internationalizing. And of course, one more aspect of that is not just to protect yourself, but also internationalizing unlocks investment and speculative opportunities that are available outside of your home country.
We had the Polish government, didn't we? They took people's pensions, and various other governments have done various other things. Now, I think people can get the idea of maybe storing their gold in Singapore or somewhere with their assets. Do you think people should also consider internationalizing their kind of citizenship, getting residencies and second passports offshore too?
Oh, absolutely. Let's just talk about what Poland did. Poland was the most recent country to nationalize their citizens' retirement savings, and this is a particularly scary thing. So how it usually happens is that a government will forcibly convert the assets held in retirement accounts into, quote, safer assets, such as government bonds. And naturally the politicians will sell this as something that's, for the people's own good, or that, they're managing the risk. But really, it's a way for governments in desperate straits to finance themselves by dumping their unwanted debt onto seniors and savers. But fortunately, if you act, before this happens, there are ways you can structure your IRA and your retirement savings to hold assets that aren't easily confiscated, like physical gold held in foreign storage locations, foreign real estate, and so forth. So internationalizing your retirement savings is definitely an important component of internationalization. But also another point you touched on are second passports, and that is another, that's a critical component as well. Unfortunately, there are no solutions to a second passport that are at the same time easy, fast, legitimate, and cheap, but it certainly doesn't lessen the need to have one.
If US citizens were thinking of maybe going for the residency rather than the second passport, where's a good place for them at the moment to get a residency?
Sure. Well, generally speaking, it's not ideal to get residency in another country because unless you're eyeing eventual naturalization and to get a citizenship, this is because when you get residency in another country, you typically get sucked into their tax system and their regulatory system. So it's usually better to be treated as a tourist rather than a cow to be milked when you become a tax resident. That said, if you intend to get a second passport, one of the ways you can do that is to become naturalized in another country. And that can be done by spending a certain amount of years as a resident of that country. So that is one reason to get residency. But other than that, it's not necessarily appealing to get residency in multiple countries. But one particular country that is attractive for this purpose right now is Panama. Panama is perhaps one of the easiest countries in the world, if not the easiest country in the world, for Americans and most Europeans to obtain permanent residency with an eye towards eventual naturalization and citizenship. And more details on that program, the nuts and bolts of it can be found on internationalman.com.
Moving on to international opportunities, Baron Rothschild once said that when there's blood on the streets, there's money to be made. You mentioned Cyprus. How can people make money out of Cyprus at the moment?
Well, certainly. That is, Cyprus is a place where there is blood in the streets and has been since last year with their bail-in and capital controls and their financial crisis. But yes, this is not necessarily a bad thing from the perspective of looking for crisis investments. And you're also right that, Baron Rothschild, he might have been an unsavory character in a number of ways, but he was absolutely correct when he said the time to buy is when the blood is in the streets. And this statement perfectly captures the essence of crisis investing. With Cyprus, Doug Casey and I were recently there scoping out opportunities on the Cyprus Stock Exchange, which is remarkably cheap. It's down something like 98% from its previous peak, which for a stock market is down as about as any stock market's been in history. So it really makes it a pretty unique opportunity. But that being said, there are still companies that are producing earnings, paying dividends, have very low debt, lots of cash, not held in Cyprus, by the way, but that are trading for remarkable discounts, sometimes less than 10% of book value. And these crisis-driven bargains are exactly why Doug and I went there, and we found ways that Americans in particular can access these opportunities. And that's kind of another issue in and of itself, is that you need to have a local brokerage account in Cyprus to really access the opportunities on the Cyprus Stock Exchange. But for Americans, this is difficult because you have all sorts of regulations and red tape that foreign financial institutions have to go through to have Americans as clients. So that being said, even in a country that is as desperate for cash and capital as Cyprus, most of the brokerages, in fact, only one of them would deal with American clients, which is really a testament to how burdensome these regulations are. But that said, Doug and I did find this one brokerage account that will open accounts for American citizens remotely with no account minimums. So this is really how you can access these incredible opportunities. And we discuss it all in our special report called Crisis Investing in Cyprus. And you can also find that on internationalman.com too.
Now, would that be a safe investment, in your opinion, in Cyprus, or should people just treat it purely as speculation where they might lose it all, or they might get 10 times their money back, and they shouldn't really worry too much about which case is going to be the one that turns out?
Well, certainly this is more of a speculative than investment opportunity. So yes, so there is obviously higher element of risk to it, but given the steep discounts that these stocks that we've identified are trading at, to us, it's a compelling case to allocate some of our speculative capital in our speculative portfolio to this opportunity. And it's not just Cyprus. Doug and I have our eye out for other crisis markets around the world. And so while Cyprus does it does present a pretty compelling opportunity, we recommend people save some of their speculative capital because there are going to be more crisis opportunities that him and I will uncover.
And where have you particularly got your eye on?
We've looked at a number of countries, actually. We've looked at some countries in Western Europe. We've looked at Zimbabwe, also Iran. Iran is an interesting case. That is obviously off limits due to sanctions, but their stock market is really attractive in terms of valuations. It's a pretty dynamic market. It's not just a couple of banks that trade on their stock market. I think it's something like 200 companies trade, and there's consumer goods, industrials, all sorts of different industries there. So Iran is an interesting case. So we're watching that one pretty closely to see what happens with the sanctions and the political developments. But obviously that's a long shot. But if that were to happen, it would be, in my opinion, the biggest investment opportunity in the world.
Now, I just wanted to ask you one last thing before we leave each other. We've heard from people like Dr. Elizabeth Lee-Vliet and Dennis Miller that Obamacare could make future health choices very difficult for Americans. Can you outline for us how people might want to protect their future health through the process of internationalization?
Yeah, sure. Internationalization can help you diversify your medical care choices. Absolutely. And diversifying your medical care is an important component of internationalization. One thing that is particularly helpful is to have some capital or some savings located outside of the United States should you need to pay for medical services in different countries. So that's another important reason why you should internationalize some of your savings or get a foreign bank account, is so that you can pay for medical care abroad should you need to do that, should options be restricted in the United States.
Okay, and you've mentioned the internationalman.com website. Are there any other online places where people can see your work?
Yeah, well, you can follow us on Twitter. We put a lot of stuff out, breaking news on Twitter that we don't necessarily have room for on the website, so that's a great place to follow us. And you can find the Twitter link also at the internationalman.com homepage. The International Man forums, also on the International Man site, is also a place for lively discussion. So if you have a question or want to talk to some people who are interested in these things, people who have implemented these strategies, it's a great place to check out too.
No, you really sound like you believe in all of this, and that's fantastic. It's been really interesting talking to you today, Nick, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.
You can subscribe to Sound Money on iTunes or sign up to our subscription service at soundmoneyshow.com, where you can also listen to our growing catalogue of podcasts. These include interviews with Doug Casey, Rick Rule, Harry Dent and Jim Rogers. I'd like to thank Nick Giambruno for joining us today, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, goodbye.